Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Bevier House Museum, the Museum of the Ulster County Historical Society. And today we're going to do part one of a guided tour of our Peter Sinclair Gallery of Early American Crafts and Trades, recently recurated by myself, Bill Merchant, and Leslie Lefevre Stratton. This is always tricky when you're by yourself, but I'm pretty sure you can all see me. You won't have to look at me for very long. My name is Bill Merchant, and I'm the Vice President here at Ulster County Historical. I'm also the Deputy Director for Collections, Historian and Curator at the D&H Canal Historical Society, the President of the D&H Transportation Heritage Council, and a board member of the Century House Historical Society. I really love my local history. But today what I'm going to do is give you part one of a tour of the tool room here. You know, Ulster County Historical has been in existence since 1858. Can you imagine? Boy, the stories we have, well, we're still uncovering stories that we have to tell. You know, cultural organizations and small museums like us have a really important function, and I'd like to use an opportunity like this to remind us all. You know, there are things that used to be everyday items, what we call vernacular tools, things that everybody had back in the time of the Revolution and even before. We were settled in 1652. Ulster County's got a huge history, and we have artifacts and items that relate to all of those various times. But what we really do is we're kind of a time capsule. We take these things. There are things in this room today that are in danger of their tales being lost in this century. The people for whom they were everyday items have passed on. We've got their books, we've got their materials, but we need organizations like this so that you can learn about the things that otherwise are going to be lost. And I'll probably tell a few of those tales as we go here. I really love this place. We've got some amazing stuff. So let's see, agriculture. Let's start with something that probably nobody knows about anymore. I'm talking about eel weirs. So this beautiful piece of sculptural iron is an eel fork or an eel spear. In fact, the really cool thing about this one, I've never seen another one like it. Boy, you gotta watch it, huh? It's two-sided and two different shaped heads. I guess this is for the fatter eels. I don't know, I've never vegetarian would no longer want to eat eel. But apparently, if you had water coming by, you would have a thing called a weir, and it would basically be a trap where people could capture eels. And so here's another beautiful, these are, you know, a lot of these old, they're like art, like folk art, you know, and that's just beautiful. And over here, you know what I'm going to have to do with this particular one? And I don't want to do too much with it here, but this actually springs open, so it's like this, and then when you hit the center, it snaps. It's a mechanical, possibly patented. You know, I haven't thought to look that up to see if there's a patent on it. And at some point, what we'll have to do is very carefully, you don't like to use these things a lot because you might break them. Many eels with a spear, like this one here, Chester, the mechanical one, this thing's very cool. I'll probably do a video sometime, just once, so that you see how the darn thing worked. But the neat thing, too, about eel is that in my studying for the when I was working on this room, I discovered and read in Jared Van Wagenen's 1953 book that you see where there's rope here? Eel skin was the best stuff. And the author in 1953 said he would still go into barns and find eel skin tacked up on the side of the barn. And they were saving it to use in that flail. I'm getting ahead of myself with the flail, but I figured I'd show you where the eel skin went. And here's another beautiful piece of cast iron work. You know, a blacksmith was an important guy to have. Along with a cooper, most everybody would have somebody with those skill sets around to make you things, to shoe your horses, to make you things like this. This is a clam shovel. Yes, flail. Thank you, Chester. Isn't that what I said? Who knows, right? So this is, once again, this would have, of course, you're seeing some of these don't have their handles on anymore. They'd normally be, well, I can't quite get there, can I? But here's another, you know, the kind of thing where you could harvest both mussels, because you could use this for mussels too, couldn't you? Or clams. That's what this particular rake was for. So many wonderful things. It's always, what shall I talk about next? Well, here's a really interesting corner. When Leslie Lefevre Stratton and I curated this room, we took out everything in this room on the off season a year and a half ago. And then we put back in, we edited it severely. If we had items that there wasn't enough to tell a story, we put them in storage. And we winnowed it down to just the best items and the things that best told the story. And then we tried to put them so that they relate to one another. And so here in this corner, we talk a little bit about beekeeping. Honeybees, they're in danger, and we really need them. Honeybees are the pollinators. The honey is a wonderful source of sugar, much better than many other, much more popular ways to get your sweetness these days. So what we've got sitting here is a pair of smokers. Here's one smoker. So if you're a beekeeper, you use smoke to calm the bees down. They're less likely to bite you. Although from what I can see, beekeepers they let themselves. It doesn't seem to bother them. But I don't know, is there a beekeeper out there to talk to me about it? Who knows? And here's another, I love this particular smoker right here because it's got a little bellows on it. And so you could actually work up that thing. You didn't have to blow on it or anything with that other one over here, presumably to keep the coals going. This one's Yankee Ingenuity. I don't know if it's really American for sure. And it's not in the best of shape. Let's see if we can see where the leather bellows is starting to go on this side here. Right over in there. But so this wouldn't work anymore. But what a wonderful device and the kind of thing you'd see in a farm. We've got a whole bunch of these sieves, whatever. And this is just one of them. This is a pretty early one, certainly 19th century. We've got a whole stack of them. We just opted to only put out one. Come on there. I've got this device that's supposed to help me, but sometimes it fights. And this is I'll see if I remember what the patent date here is. Cornell's Incubator. So if you're going to have chickens, you're going to have a spot to put the eggs. And this is this wonderful, I believe, just before the turn of the 20th century. So clearly at that point, Cornell University, Ezra Cornell, Thomas Cornell's brother, cousin, I can't remember. But Ezra Cornell, very important in the tale of the telegraph. You know, Samuel Morse didn't do it all himself. Like so many great inventions, there were other people, and Ezra Cornell was very important to the development of the telegraph, which in its day was just as game-changing as the internet has been in our lifetimes. What do we used to do? Boy, that's just a beautiful picture right there, a little light streaming in. This is such a wonderful little very early stone building that's on the back of our main building. So there's a little agricultural corner for you right there. And now let's just go along the wall here and see what else we might have. I think I need to put this way. You know, I've seen the shepherd's crooks in I don't know how many cartoons, but this is the only real one I've ever seen. You know, as a woodworker, you can't, with a little cup on the end for you to pull your fruit out of the tree. The next thing in the line here, as long as I've got service, anybody have any idea what that is? Take a rope right there. It's a pig catcher. Presumably, what'd you do? Grab him by the ring on his nose or something? You know, pigs are big animals. I question how well that would catch a pig, but that's what the catalog says, and so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And this is a spade for cutting turf and the like. So there in the corner, a hay fork. Not a pitchfork. Pitchforks only had 3 tines, 2 or 3 tines. It's a hay fork when it's got more than that. The things you learn as a curator, folks. Obviously, that's for hay. Then over here, we've got 2 different kinds of scythes, or sickles, used for cutting grain. And the one in the back there, the left-hand one, is just a straight-up scythe. Kind of makes you think of the Grim Reaper, right? And then there's a cradle scythe. And I'm told that these were popular through the Revolution. And then in the early 19th century, you start getting more mechanical devices and stuff. But that's a cradle scythe right there, or sickle. The flail was also used. That's the thing that's hanging there. You would use that to strike the grain. You'd swing it around, and the swipple is the end thing. And as I say, where we've got a piece of clothesline, back in the day, they really liked eel skin. right there to use right on that, for that part there. Yeah, you can imagine clothesline. We all know how quickly that breaks, right? This is particularly nice. If you notice, this hay fork was made splitting a single piece of wood and separating it out like that. Boy, you know, the stuff that they used to make with just hand tools is why I'm so drawn to woodworking tools in particular, sort of my own personal specialty. Let's just see, we'll go over here, because this is maybe one of my favorite. I've seen an awful lot of shave horses, but I've never seen one that was like a piece of sculpture like this one. Look at this. So, all right, you stay where I want you to, all right. I've still got to figure out how to shoot in landscape. This would lend itself there. I'll back out. So notice how instead of putting it up on legs, so many sawhorses would have a leg on this side. They use the shape of the wood in the same way that shipwrights. All the ribs on boats, they had to find trees that had those curves. They didn't bend them. You couldn't bend anything that big. This is amazing that this craftsman made such a beautiful job. What you would do is hold a piece of wood through here, and they would do barrel staves right in here. And there's a foot thing that locks it down like that. It's hard for me to do everything by myself here, but and then they would be able to work towards themselves with a draw knife or a spoke shave. And this next little piece here was used for cutting corn husks and fodder for your animals. We've got it sort of, let's see if we can give you a better idea here. So the grain was sitting there, and then you had this. We've got it locked in so nobody hurts themselves. You know, when you're a public amenity, you want to make sure the kids can't hurt themselves. Kids of all ages. So, you know, part of why I like to do Facebook Live as opposed to just doing straight up video certainly has a lot of advantages, but I do like the idea that I can ask you people questions. This, according to our catalog, is a lard press. And when I look up lard presses, none of them look quite like this. I mean, it's hard to say what's going. Let's see, trademark. The farmer's favorite mark. Well, that doesn't tell us what they used it for. There is a press here, and there's a box that may or may have not gone with it. We wonder if this isn't both an apple press with another thing on it. This could be, most of the lard presses that you see on the internet are sausage stuffers, and you put stuff in the top of them, and it comes out and fills sausage. But I've been looking at this one. I still can't quite make it out. But so it's a what's it? You know, so if any of you have any ideas, please share with us. This will be up on our Facebook page afterwards, and so you can email us or do comments, and one of us, myself or somebody here, will get back to you. You know, it's hard to have favorite items when you work in so many museums. You have to have a whole bunch of favorite items. But here's one of my favorite items. This is a toll sign, and you can see, if you look very carefully, where the prices have been changed, so it have been repainted. It's beautifully painted. It looks as though it must have been done with a stencil. I don't know if there's a way, either that or somebody just amazingly talented, much better than me. And this reminded me of a story. Hey, how many people have heard "to mill or meeting," which presumably means it was a phrase in the middle of the 20th century, according to Jared Van Wagenen. He mentioned it as though we ought to all know what that means. Well, apparently, you could cross toll roads and toll bridges for free if you could prove you were going to church, the meeting, or to the mill. So to mill or meeting meant getting a free pass. But we don't know a lot about this sign, and we're going to try and figure out it. Very hard when you get a dissociated object like this. There's nothing in it in our catalog. It was probably came to us before people were cataloging even. We've been around since 1858. But I just love this. From the minute 25 years ago when I moved here, and the first time I came here, I was taken with this. It used to be in the kitchen. We thought it belonged in the tool room. I'm kind of skipping over the saws because I'm going to try and make that happen next week. 2 weeks from now when I do part 2 of this room. And here we've got on the left that red thing, later red paint. That's a wagon jack. When a wagon was the main way you might go and go places, right? So you're in your wagon going across the toll road. It's not time altogether there, right? The dangers of working alone, right? You start talking to yourself. So that's a wagon jack. Never seen another one like it. It actually does go up and down. It actually works. Next to it's a similar item, but this would be a house jack. We use pneumatic jacks today for things like that. But this would be used if you were, going to move a building, raise a building. My canal side 1820s house, I had to jack up one part of it. I didn't use a jack like this. I used pneumatics. Sorry. As much as I like old tools, sometimes new tools are the thing. This, we're told, this next little thing here, let's see if I can get it in your view, is a rope maker. And it works with a treadle, like so many treadle tools. Wait, there we go, come on. So this is a rope maker, you treadle, and this apparently, I'm still trying to figure it out. It's missing one of its pieces. You can see it would spin like that. But this is, of course, broken off. Not surprising. It's surprised that the other one's still on there, really. Back when you made everything, even rope. As we come around here, swing around. And this machine, let's see if I can get back far enough to show you, is for making brooms. And I haven't quite figured out this one either yet. Obviously, we're missing parts, but it would be to make a broom like this. So it would be to pull all this together. But not a lot of places that even have stuff like this. So it's such a tough to figure out how it worked. But that's part of the fun of it too. Endlessly fascinating. And there's, of course, a very early broom. You made everything back in the day, didn't you? And just since we're doing a strict tour of this room, there's just a beautiful old lantern. We see so many tin lanterns that punch tin and stuff. Most of them are probably reproductions from the middle of the 20th century. This one's a real deal old one right here. That's one of the advantages of being around as long as we have. And here's another beautiful item. I've seen them in books. This is the only one I've ever seen. This is an 18th century winnowing basket. When you were, after you'd used the flail to flail off the tops of your grain, and mind you, I've never done this, so this is not speculation exactly, but I'm trying to wrap my brain around it too. You would put them up in these baskets, and in fact, in barns, you'd have the doors open, so that you get a breeze through, and you'd toss the wheat and the chaff up in the air, and the lighter chaff, I guess, would blow away, and the hard kernels would wind up in the winnowing basket. And as you can see, that's a pretty big, just to give you an idea, that's my hand. That's almost 3 foot across. That's an awful big piece. But the kind of thing that would have been really common, a lot of these things like the scythes and the winnowing basket probably fell out of favor as better mechanical contrivances were invented. I think McCormick and all those guys by the early 1830s, 1840s, This is called a boom, and this is, I'm told, a sycamore tree. I am a woodworker. Now, I saw Chester put up a picture earlier calling it a barrel, but it's not technically a barrel, it's a boom. And what it'd be is that you hollowed out the tree, and that way you could you put grain in it, and it's bottomless because you just set it in the corner of the barn. Made it easier to clean, didn't it? You just lift it up and roll it around there, right? As I was saying too, you made all sorts of wooden stuff. Here's a beautiful scoop for grain anything you needed, really, right? Here's another one. Could use that as a ladle for water too, I suppose, whereas that top piece is really just a scoop. And now, wooden shovels. Why would you make a shovel out of wood? Wooden shovels were very popular in mills because a metal shovel could cause a spark, which would cause a fire, which could be a real problem in a mill full of grain. Think about how easily that must catch fire, right? Crazy stuff. And I said I wasn't going to show you saws, but this is a special saw, and it's sort of all by itself here. So this is an ice saw. by about the Civil War until about the 1930s, I don't think it was much earlier than the Civil War, but somebody out there may correct me on that. People would store ice. They'd cut up big blocks of ice, a foot square or better, and they put them in buildings, specially made buildings with no windows, and they'd insulate them with sawdust. And that ice would keep well into the summer, and they'd ship it down to the Indies, and they'd take it places. That's why you had ice boxes. A man would come around with this ice. So in the winter, canalers and farmers would find work cutting ice on the Hudson River, on ponds, on certain rivers. There's many sites along the Hudson River, flat, looks like it's even landfill, that were the sites of ice houses. Big, huge buildings to store your ice. And a huge thing that the refrigerator kind of made obsolete. Now you can see all of this wonderful new lighting, but let me see if I can get, yeah, there you go. This is just a wonderful thing about, it's a new plan for refining cider by a John Copland of Troy, New York. First, apples are indispensable, which should be gathered clean and free from decay. Grind and let the pumice stand 24 hours, if circumstances will permit. Lay up the cheese and press it gently with flannel cloth. I guess that stuff they're referring to as cheese. Suspended where the cider runs off through it, which it may filtrate. The cider thus made will have the fine flavor and richness of color not surpassed by the choicest wines of France or Spain. Fill your casks, which must be pure and sweet. The most effectual method of restoring casks impregnated with must or taint is by stone lime. So apparently you'd clean with lime. The cask being full, let the cider work till it forms a crust on top. Draw it off immediately into another pure cask. Then to find and preserve it, put it each in a barrel. Oh, and they're saying you can add white of eggs. So somebody's added a few notes. And on they go. So yes, according to Alf Evers, a local historian, you drink cider with all your meals. Water, nobody knew about germ theory, so water wasn't necessarily a good thing to drink. Then, when the cider turned hard, well, you'd still drink it. In fact, you might like it, right? And then when it turned to vinegar, you'd still use it. And he tells the story that people would go and actually, they would take barrels of apples. We'll talk about barrels in 2 weeks' time. They'd take barrels of apples and sink them in the rivers through the winter so that they'd have fresh apples come spring. Amazing, right? The ingenuity. And now we're going to close up here with this one agricultural case. So far, this is working well enough. I'll probably try it again in 2 weeks. We'll just have to bear with me when my internet, maybe I'll move the router a little closer before then. But what we got here is going to be hard for me to show you. A scythe and scythe hook. The Dutch scythe and mat hook, excuse me. Thank God there's signage here, Leslie. The Dutch scythe and mat hook. So when the Dutch settled this area, 1619, we were New Netherlands until the English take over finally in 70s. Oh, I'm going to get the dates wrong. The 1670s, roughly. The English take over, but then they give it back to the Dutch, and then the Dutch trade it back for access to the Spice Islands on the other side of the world. Commerce was already international, was already spanning the globe in the 17th century. But the Dutch came here and they used a scythe and a mat hook, a scythe like scythe. And so look at this beautiful, the handle was just a piece of wood. And then at the end of it, there's a scythe. And you don't have to bend over like with the English scythe. And the mat hook you used, and here's two different mat hooks, you would use to hold the grain while you scythed it. Never heard of such things, but we've got them here. And there's another one of those stories that if you said to somebody, hey, you know what a scythe is? They'd look at you like, this is a great Scrabble word, isn't it? Scythe, S-I-T-H, wow. And here, of course, a lot of people have seen sheep shears right there. That horn next to it was to hold the weigh stone, would be the sharpening stone for your scythe or your scythe. And you would have that horn on your belt, and you put the stone in it. And while you were working, you would stop for a minute, and you go and sharpen it up when it wasn't sharp enough. And that way you didn't have to run back to the barn, do a grinding stone or anything. You just did it all in the field. This next thing's hard to see, but so that, ladies and gentlemen, anybody want to guess about that one? I can see there's 60 out there. That is a mule anchor. You tie a rope in blacksmiths, and we'll talk a little bit more about blacksmiths in 2 weeks' time when I get to that case. But these are some oxen. These are from the farm of Sidney Reese, the late Sidney Reese. Brenda, if you're out there, we still think of your husband, the late Sidney. Wet scraper for your horse. You lather them all off. You go and get some of the sweat off them quickly with that beautiful wooden made stuff. That next thing is a hay fork. I'm not sure how those worked. Anybody out there want to let me know? Wonderful, hard to see with the glare, but those are from the 1856 Ulster County Fair and Cattle Show right there. Amazing. Must have been donated right after 2013. Never mind. From Ontario. Stuff gets far afield, but it finds its way back to us. Isn't that wonderful? So here we've got corn pegs. So they say, I guess that's to eat your corn. Again, another one of those tools that you never knew anything about. And last but not least, and we'll talk about the other end of this, these are spills, these are taps to put for maple sugaring. So if you didn't have honeybees, or even if you did, you might also tap your maple trees for that wonderful maple syrup. So join me in 2 weeks' time at 2 o'clock when we're going to get to the rest of this room. There's a whole lot of really nice stuff I didn't talk about today that we'll get to talk about in 2 weeks' time, and I promise to try and get the technical problems straightened out for you. Always a learning curve here. Things I learned at COVID, how to live stream without problems. Oh well. So once again, let's finish where we started. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you all in 2 weeks.